This is a bipartisan agreement in the end, but it sticks to the numbers, the agreement on spending. It does not go above that.
Let's make sure we finish the job and don't drag this debate into March.
The yeas are 77, the nays are 13, and the bill is passed.
Crisis averted over the shutdown for now. We're used to this by now, right? Lawmakers punted for another week, sending the shutdown deadlines further into March and creating even more urgency for President Biden ahead of next week's State of the Union address. Let's check in now with my friend and colleague, Cate Martell. Cate, the latest on the shutdown drama.
Yeah, Kevin, as you said, they only punted these shutdown deadlines by a week. So this does not take the pressure off of congressional lawmakers to continue to try to fund the government. I think the biggest outstanding issues are still there. We saw President Biden meet with the big four, the major congressional leaders, to try to come to some agreement. And the fact that they keep punting it, I would not want to be Speaker Johnson right now, because you see all of the dynamics that he has to balance. And, it seems at this point that there's not an easy way to get out of these spending discussions. And, either they can fund the government by March 8th, March 22nd, which are the current deadlines, or these might even get punted even further.
So while all of this is going on, one of the biggest stories in recent Washington history, at least as it relates to the industry of Washington, of course, is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell announcing that he is stepping down at the end of the year. And former President Donald Trump is already reshaping the Senate. Senator John Cornyn, a Republican from Texas, he says that he's going to be the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. What do we know?
Yeah, he definitely could be. Right now we're hearing of the Battle of the Johns. It's ironic that 3 Republican senators named John are likely the top contenders to replace McConnell. That's Senators John Barrasso, John Cornyn, and John Thune. All of them have very subtle policy differences. Senator Barrasso is probably the most closely aligned with President Trump, but it's really opening, these tensions within the Republican Party in the replacement of McConnell. McConnell had a bitter falling out with former President Trump in 2020 and hasn't really talked to him since. So the big question is, whoever is going to replace McConnell, how closely aligned with Trump will they be? And we're seeing a lot of tensions in the Senate on what Republicans actually seem to want in a replacement.
And for Cornyn to come out and say that he is running to be the leader of the Senate for the Republicans, it is interesting. And where Trump's endorsement comes, I think, is also going to be interesting. And quite frankly, there might be another pick outside of the 3 Johns that Washington is talking about. If there's one thing that we know, Trump likes to have his mark in terms of the leadership, not just of the RNC, of course, now with Lara Trump, his daughter-in-law, but also likely in Congress as well. So Alabama, switching gears for a second, Alabama passed a bill to protect IVF services. And it looks now, Cate, like this is going to settle the issue, or do you expect other states to pass similar legislation? Florida backed down this week from similar legislation. Do you think that the Supreme Court is going to have to rule on this eventually?
I would not be surprised, Kevin, if this reached the Supreme Court. That, like you mentioned, Alabama did pass a law to try to protect IVF protections in the state. But this really just put a Band-Aid on the issue and opened a massive can of worms that I would not be surprised if we see other states with strict abortion measures to try to implement several laws. What the concerning part is, because the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that an embryo is a human life, that then adds, all of this liability to a lot of these fertility clinics. And that brings up a lot of worries for fertility clinics that, normally when a lot of these embryos are pulled out, they're looked for genetic abnormalities, and a lot of them end up being discarded. Now it opens this major question of what happens to these unused embryos, and we don't see a solution in sight. So while Alabama did kind of try to put a Band-Aid on this issue, we still see this massive can of worms in other states. And I would not be surprised if this heads to the Supreme Court once we start seeing other states act with similar types of laws.
And Biden and Trump are both down at the border. What do we know about what went down at the border? Did they run into each other?
They did not run into each other. And, we're not talking about south of the border on 95 between North Carolina and South Carolina, which anybody who has driven knows what I'm talking about.
Yes.
If they've driven on 95.
Yes. So what went down at the border?
Yeah, so Trump and Biden were both on the US-Mexico border yesterday for these competing trips. They were not in the same place. Biden was in Brownsville, Trump was at Eagle Pass, and they had very different messages. I think my biggest takeaway is that Trump seemed fairly comfortable on the border, that he's had multiple trips down there, and that has been one of the biggest issues that he's run on in his campaign since 2016 with, bring the border wall, build the wall, and, that's evolved now into border security. And, he's very comfortable going after President Biden and knowing that Biden is the incumbent and does look liable for the issues on the border. Meanwhile, President Biden, this is only his second trip to the border since becoming president. So he seemed a little bit out of his element, but it really does show you that how big of an issue this will be in the November campaign. So the fact that Biden is visiting there and is really trying to pin the issue on Republicans by saying, hey, we had a border bill. We were trying to implement border security protections. And behind the scenes, former President Trump was trying to sink that bill so that could help him politically and he can run on the campaign trail. So both sides were playing the blame game and trying to put it back on each other.
It's the number one issue. I mean, Scott Traynor tells us this every day. Decision Desk HQ over at thehill.com. It's the number one issue, immigration. It beats the economy. It beats inflation. It's beating foreign policy. I mean, immigration, I can't stress this enough. I mean, from your reporting, this is all anybody's talking about. So I would anticipate that they're going to have to go down to that border quite many more times because people want to know. People want to know what Washington is doing about the crisis at the border. Cate, did you hear about this? Monica Lewinsky, there's a name you haven't heard in a while. Monica Lewinsky is returning to the fashion industry. She is the newest face of the sustainability brand Reformation. Now, this campaign aims to promote voter registration and participation. How impactful are campaigns like these, Cate Martell, and Monica Lewinsky also really establishing herself as a voice against online bullying and harassment. What do we know?
Yeah, good for her. She was subject to a lot of very public shaming for a lot of years, and she's trying to turn around and flip the script and is becoming a public figure. She looks great in that campaign, and by having trying to spin it into getting people out to vote is really taking, her platform and trying to use it to get people registered to vote. I say that's great for her. You see a lot of celebrities out there trying to use their influence to help elections. And, like you were mentioning, that she's also been trying to be out there and on the front of cyberbullying, that she has taken all this public shaming that she endured for so many years when she was young and in her 20s, and has really had a hard time, changing her reputation. And she's, I think, doing everything that she can now and is really trying to help herself. And I think that this type of campaign is effective. And you see a lot of these celebrities doing this. Good for her.
I agree. I mean, especially if there's one thing we've learned in the last couple of years is that the way celebrities, particularly female young women, were treated back in the 90s and the early aughts, it's horrible. I mean, it's crazy. And so good for her for really using what she went through as an opportunity to help others, especially in the online harassment space. Good for her. I agree with you completely on that. Did you see this survey? We've been texting about this all day. This new survey from Wells Fargo, it says that women, for them, money is almost as tough to talk about as sex, and it's even harder to talk about than religion, politics, or death. So I was really struck by this. Half of women, Cate, said that they were reluctant to talk about money because they consider it a private topic. Meanwhile, men, only 41% of men were reluctant to talk about money. I mean, this is really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Money has always been taboo. And, I'm starting to see, particularly on social media, more of a presence of people trying to be more open about some of their finances. I think to push back on some of this culture that, particularly salaries, that's something that has always been taboo to talk about. And you tried to see a lot of public figures trying to flip the script on that. There's actually this one woman, Salary Transparent Street on social media, who goes out with a microphone in public and starts asking random people, what do you do and how do you make? What do you make? And it's fascinating to try to see that people don't want to talk about these issues, and they're really trying to make them, I think, more public. But, it's more effective, I think, so far. Men are more comfortable talking about it than women. But that's still such a high number. Wow.
So 60% of all respondents said that it was difficult to talk about sex. 57% said that it was difficult to talk about personal finance. Comparatively speaking, 40% said it was hard to talk about politics. Only 29% said religion, and 28% said their health. I mean, when I was growing up outside of Philly and Zelko, my parents would always say, you don't talk about sex, religion, or politics at the dinner table. So what career did I choose? A career where I talk about sex, religion, and politics every day, essentially. So I guess I didn't really listen to my parents. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But there does seem to be a cultural shift. Last week I interviewed Congressman Richie Torres, and people like Senator John Fetterman. I mean, they're really moving the conversation forward and talking about issues like mental health, about other things that men typically haven't talked about either. What do you think there is a shift sort of in the not just the broader culture, but even in terms of how politicians are talking about these issues as well?
Yeah, I do think that we're starting to see a little of this shift, like you mentioned, and particularly with the women's pay gap. That the way you have to be transparent about salaries, and you have to be okay talking about these things. That for example, negotiating a new salary is an uncomfortable topic. That has always historically been something that people dread doing, and if you have to be transparent about some of these things to try to equal these salaries. So I have started to see this become particularly a women's issue, that be comfortable, know your worth, start talking about these issues, and be more public and confident about them. And the first start is being able to talk about them, right?
I still think traditionally women are way better at balancing budgets just because of all of the things they have to do. That's just my 2 cents on that. But I also think it's about who you talk to. I'm very guarded, right? But you got to have a mentor. And we got to teach this in schools, financial literacy. We got to teach kids. I mean, the first financial tool you get is a piggy bank. I'm going to let you go. Cate Martell, thank you so much for your time breaking down all of these headlines. Always a privilege to chat with my friend and colleague, The Hill's Cate Martell. Read her newsletter, my favorite newsletter in Washington, D.C., the 1230 Report. Thanks, Cate.
Thanks, Kevin.
Congress should have gotten in a room and strengthened the bill and come out and done something. But Donald Trump told them not to do anything until after the general election because it would hurt him. We can't wait one more day.
She is not dropping out of this race anytime soon. Nikki Haley slamming former President Donald Trump on the campaign trail for blocking a bipartisan Senate border bill that would have addressed the crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. Haley was campaigning in central Virginia, where her campaign says that more than 1,000 people were packed to hear her speak ahead of the March 5th Super Tuesday contest. Haley has yet to win a single state in the Republican primary, but she continues to stay in the race. 15 states will hold Republican nominating contests on Tuesday, including Virginia. That means there's 865 delegates that are up for grabs, about 1/3 of the total delegates at stake in the entire process. In the wings of the rally, Haley told NBC's Meet the Press that she thinks all of Trump's legal cases should be settled ahead of the November election, but she declined to predict if she thinks she's going to walk away with any W's on Super Tuesday. And remember, you can tune in to The Hill's special Super Tuesday coverage on YouTube Tuesday night, beginning at 5 p.m. Eastern. And on thehill.com, we are going to have all of the latest Decision Desk HQ results with reporting and analysis from The Hill's all-star team of the most trusted journalists in Washington, D.C. Closing arguments are underway in the case to remove Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis from the team prosecuting former President Donald Trump. It comes after days of legal love drama around Willis's relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade. He's the guy, remember, that she tapped to lead the case against the former president. Now, Willis and Wade have both confirmed their relationship, but they say it ended last summer and had no effect at all on the case. Trump is being charged with trying to overturn the 2020 election in the Peach State. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told Time magazine that she hopes President Biden will call for a ceasefire in his upcoming State of the Union address that is scheduled for next week. The president had hoped for a ceasefire to happen before the State of the Union address, but Hamas squashed that hope earlier this week. Israeli Defense Forces have said that they are open to agree to some type of short-term ceasefire, provided that Hamas releases the hostages from Hamas's October 7th terror attack against Israel. Since the terror attack against Israel, more than 30,000 people have lost their lives in Gaza. The family to Alexei Navalny, Russia President Vladimir Putin's political nemesis, gathered in Moscow earlier for his funeral. Navalny died in prison in Russia, and since his death, his widow and family members have met with President Biden. The White House has also since responded by having 500 sanctions against Russia. Elon Musk is taking ChatGPT's parent company OpenAI and its CEO Sam Altman to court over what he says is a betrayal of the company's founding principles. Musk said in a suit filed Thursday that when he entered an agreement to fund the AI developer, Altman agreed to keep the company as a non-profit and would keep its code open to the public. Musk says in the suit that by working closely with Microsoft, OpenAI broke that agreement. Musk is suing over breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, and unfair business practices. Oprah is leaving the board of Weight Watchers after almost a decade. The entertainment mogul recently opened up about using weight loss drugs. Her departure is sparking speculation of how well the company's stocks are going to fare, and Oprah says that she is donating her interest in the company to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. A nuclear weapons facility in the Texas Panhandle is back open after it was evacuated Tuesday in response to the massive Smokehouse Creek wildfire. New images from space show just how massive this wildfire has become. It's officially the largest in Texas history. It covers nearly 1,700 square miles. That's an area, get this, that's larger than Rhode Island. At least 2 people have died in the fire, according to the Texas A&M Forest Service, and it's just 3% contained as of Friday. That's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.